Hi there. This is Regina McCombs. I teach at the Hubbard School of Journalism at the University of Minnesota. And this tutorial is an introduction to Audacity, which is the audio editing software that we use in Journalism 3102. Just to give a quick introduction to Audacity, it's free software, it's open source, which means it's been developed by a bunch of people who put their efforts into it. It gets updated pretty frequently, and it's really got a lot of features and nice elements particularly for a free piece of software. So we're going to sort of talk about how it works and sort of the basics of the layout and things. But before we do that, I want to talk about what you need to do before you even get into Audacity. So you recorded on your Tascam, and you should have an SD card that has those files on it. Now, I've used this SD card for a number of things, so I have a variety of folders that you likely won't have. But you'll have a couple of things on here that you should be able to see. This little file is something that Tascam created when you put the card in. And then this folder called Music is where your audio files will be. So if I open that up, I see I've got three audio files in here. I know that this first one is just a test file I did to make sure my microphone is working, so I'm not going to worry about that one. But I want to move these other two off the card and into a workspace. Now, you should be sure that you never ever edit from your SD card itself. There's a lot of reasons for that, but you will find that if you try to play files and things directly from your SD card, they kind of are jerky or weird. So if you ever see that when you're trying to work on an edit, things are a little strange, make sure you're not editing directly from the SD card. So to make sure I don't do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my external drive here, and I am going to create a new folder. And I am going to call it, very cleverly, 3102, Interview 1. All right, so now I have this folder. You can call it whatever you want, obviously, but I'm going to put all the related files into this folder. And so what that means is if I take my external drive and go to a different machine in the lab, it will work fine. All the files will be exactly together, and it'll be really easy to just connect to my drive and start to edit. If you are working on your own machine and everything's going to be on your internal drive, that's fine. But again, I would organize it this same way and make sure all your files are together in one place. And so whenever you go to edit, everything's going to be really well organized. So I've created this folder called 3102 Interview. It's empty. I'm going to take files 2 and 3. Since I know file 1 is just a test, and I'm going to drop it over here on my hard drive, my external drive. All right, now, just to make sure that I don't accidentally edit from my card, which happens way more times than you think it might, I'm actually going to come over and eject my SD card. So now I know that if I go into Audacity and start to edit, I will be working from my hard drive. So now I'm going to open up Audacity. If I did File Open at this point, it would open each file in its own window. And I don't want that. I want all my files to be in the same workspace. So instead of doing Open, I'm going to do File Import. And I'm going to import audio, and I'm going to go find these two files, right? And I'm going to select them and click Open. Now you'll see that what they've done is they've each loaded on a different track. If I was importing 10 files, they would each open on their own track and they'd all be lined up. There we go. We can see what we're looking at here is this is my file 1 and or 2, and this is file 3. This one is my interview file, I know, because that went on for about 4.5 minutes, and this is my natural sound. So if I hit the space bar, which is play, or the play button, you can see that they both play equally loudly and at the same time. So that's not very useful because you need to be able to hear one over the other. So what I can do is use these solo and mute buttons. So if I only want to hear one, I can click the one that I want to solo and play.
Can you keep us afloat? We appreciate you.
So she sounds a little muffled, right? Because she's wearing a face mask. So that's unfortunate, but there we go. So you'll see this track gets kind of grayed out, and I'm not hearing that, and it, without me doing anything, hit mute here. So it might be if you have multiple tracks and you want to hear 2 or 3 at a time, you just mute the ones that you don't want to hear. What we see here are what are called waveforms, and they are just visual representations of what an audio file looks like. So the taller the waveform, the broader, the higher and lower it goes, the louder that file is. And so we can see that these smaller areas, the audio is softer, and these bigger areas, it's louder. So, and you can sort of start to see the rhythm of her speech. The more often that you look at wave files, the better you'll get at sort of identifying. Even if you can't hear it, you'll get able to identify what's happening. All right, so you'll see there's this bar across the bottom that lets you kind of drag the width of your timeline that you've created at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save my project now. Once I have all my files in here, before I do anything else, just to make sure nothing crashes, nothing bad happens, is I'm going to save my project. So I'm going to do File, Save Project. So you'll see here it has a warning that says Save Project is for an Audacity project, not an audio file. For an audio file that will export into other apps, use Export. So what it's telling me is what I'm doing here is just saving a project. I'm saving this workspace. I'm sort of saving how I've left the layouts. And so what I'm going to do, and you'll see that the file extension here is not WAV, but it is AUP. So that's telling me this is an Audacity project, and I'm going to label it Interview 1 very cleverly. And now it has saved the project file. So when you go to file your stories, you will need to export a WAV file, not just the AUP file. So if you're submitting an AUP file, that is the wrong file. So just remember that. This is only your workspace and sort of your layout and the levels you've set and all that kind of thing. It is not an edited audio file. So now you'll see we have numbers across here. This is sort of time in seconds, right? So we're at 15 seconds here, 30 seconds here. So if I click anywhere along here, you'll see down here it also tells me that I'm at 0 minutes and 36 seconds. Here I'm at 1 minute 42 seconds. I get a sort of rough idea of that from up here, but this tells me exactly where I am. So again, spacebar is play, and hitting it again is stop. We want, if you're using the play up here, that's fine, but be sure that you hit stop and not pause. Weird things happen if you use pause, so I highly recommend you just don't use it. So always just hit the stop button when you want to stop playing. So now you'll see that if I hit my space bar and let it play up here, I have a meter bouncing. And my levels aren't too bad. There may be a hair low, but overall they're pretty good. So we're not going to worry about the levels then for now, as long as they're sort of in a close range. When we go to finish it up and polish it up, we'll want our levels to be exactly right, and we'll play with that a little bit more. But at this stage, we're just looking to make sure that it's usable audio and that it's okay. And so our meters are telling me, yeah, it's not bad. So next, I'm going to talk about a couple of the tools here. So this first tool you saw was our selection tool. It lets us move around. It's very much like a cursor. In the same way a cursor would work, I can kind of drag across and select an area of the file. So we'll come back to our selection tool over and over and over again. Now, the next tool we use quite a bit is what they call the time shift tool. And what that does is actually let us move our clips around on the timeline. So I'm actually going to drag this down to, I don't know, 2.5 minutes-ish. It doesn't really matter, but I know I want a finished product that's less than a minute, so I'm just actually making workspace at the beginning of my timeline. Now, the way people edit varies between people. Some people will want to work on multiple different tracks. Other people will put their edits at the beginning. Others will copy and paste into new timelines. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. We're just gonna do it this way for this project, and just know that is not the only acceptable way to do it. You'll find a lot of people doing different things. So that is our time shift tool that basically just lets us move these around. If I wanted to, I could put this up on this track. But the way that I like to add it is I like to keep all my interviews on one track and my natural sound on another. And that way when I go to trim up a story or something, I know exactly, I can look right away and know which is my interviews and which is my natural sound, and where to go from there. Okay, so the one other tool we're going to talk about right now is this one, this zoom tool, which is exactly what you might expect, right? It's as I click, it zooms in closer and closer. And you will use that if you really want to sort of see, is there a weird click or pop, is something going on, or when you get to polishing it and you just really want to get in close and make sure you cut things off at exactly the right spot. And then to zoom out, I hit the Shift key and click, and we go back out until I can see everything. And I'm just going to drag this over and make sure I'm seeing the beginning, and there's the 0, so we're back at the beginning, so that's good. Actually, I'm going to zoom in just a hair more. Okay, so now I've created some empty space at the beginning for me to work. I've got my interview on the top track and my natural sound on the second track. And I've sort of taken a look at my beginning tools, and so we're ready to get started here doing some editing. Because I have listened to my files already and sort of have some idea of what I want to use, I know I want to start with some natural sound. I have to switch back to my selection tool, and I am going to play it right here. Okay, and I like some of the traffic noise because I'm sitting outside on a patio, and there's some of the sounds of silverware clinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag over this selection. If I've cut it too short, you'll see I can use the little arrow finger and make it a little bit longer. And I am going to do just like I would in word processing. I'm going to copy and paste. So you can either do Command C like you would software, or I can do copy. And then since I want to start my story out with that, I'm going to put my selection tool at the very beginning, and I'm going to edit, paste. So you'll see that this shoved this aside to make a little room. That's fine, doesn't matter. And now I have an exact copy of this at the beginning. Okay, so that worked out fine. And now I'm going to unsolo this. And I'm going to solo the interview, and I know that right about in here, there was a section I thought I wanted.
Some of the smaller things I would share is just the simplest things of people wanting to sit at a different table because the air quality is better over there.
Okay, I don't want me talking there, right? So I'm just going to take this selection before I start to babble, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to move it over here. And because I want a little bit of natural sound at the beginning before the interview starts, I'm going to pick that spot, and I'm going to paste that in there. So now you can see if I play it from the beginning, got some natural sound.
To sit at a different table because the air quality is...
Okay, so now we can see that the natural sound is way loud. Because our volume is out of whack, we're going to use a different tool, which is called the envelope tool. So if we go up here, you'll see this one here with the 2 points looking at each other. And you'll see as soon as I click that, we get sort of some weird lines and things. So what that lets us do is then change the volume. So I can change the volume of the whole thing just by clicking and dragging, but I don't want to do that. I want it to be loud at the beginning, or full volume at the beginning, and then I want it to go down once she starts to talk. So you'll see every time I click, I get another white dot those are called keyframes. And so basically what I want to do is, and if I get one in the wrong spot, I can kind of click it and drag it around till I get it to where I want it. So I want to put one right where she's going to start to talk, and that's where I'm going to want to sort of create an anchor point, essentially. And then this next one I will take and I will drag it down so that the audio comes down. Now if we play it, and I have to go back to my selection tool.
Some of the smaller things I would share is...
So we can hear that it went down some, but maybe not enough. It's still sort of overwhelming her. So I'm going to start my audio dropping a little bit sooner, and I'm going to go down a little faster and a little bit more. And there's no sort of hard and fast rule for this. This is where you really just have to listen and say, is the natural sound loud enough, too loud? This is where a good pair of headphones will help you a lot, being able to sort of hear what the balance is. And so, again, there's no rules for this, but you're going to want to listen and make sure it's how you want it to sound.
Some of the smaller things I would share is just the simplest things of people wanting to...
So because there's sort of some natural sound behind her, I'm actually going to play with this even more and bring it so that it goes all the way out. So if I drag this to here, that means the audio is completely gone at that point. So I'm going to switch back to my selection tool and I'm going to play it again.
Some of the smaller things I would share is just the simplest things of people wanting to sit at a different table because the air quality is better over there.
So there we go. So now I feel like my levels are pretty good, pretty consistent. But the one thing I also need to look at then is, what does my volume up here look like? So I'm going to play it again and I'm going to watch my meters. And so that's a hair low, actually. It's not terrible, but I'm going to raise it up. And so here we have this dial that is called gain. And what gain does is it just brings your export volume up. And I remember that this was maybe just a hair low, but not bad. So I'm going to try that and I'm going to watch my meters and see how it looks. Okay, maybe still a hair low. So I'm going to bring it up another decibel.
Some of the smaller things I would share is...
Okay, so now they're peaking very close to this -6. And so I'm going to call that close enough. And so that sort of gets me in the range. If I was all finished, what I'm going to have you do is save your project. Again, so Command S. You're going to save it. You can also do File, Save Project, right? Save Project. Now the problem is, if I export this as it is right now, it's going to export my first two little clips that I have just how I want. It's going to export a whole bunch of silence, and then it's going to export these complete clips as well. So what I'm going to do is, I need to delete these clips, right? But I think, what if I want to come back and edit this some more? I might want to change some things. I might get done and realize something's wrong. And if the clips are gone, then I won't have them in here and I'll have to re-import them. And, you know, it's a big kind of a pain. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I think this is it. I'm going to do File, Save Project, and I'm going to save a lossless copy of the project. So I'm going to save, and it's going to say again, this is a project, not an exported files. This is a good way to back up your project. Okay, so we're going to save this, and I'm going to save it as Interview 1, and I'm going to call this complete because it will have all my files still in it. All right, there it is. It's exporting it. So what I'm going to do then is I am going to actually select all of these audio, this audio, and I'm just going to delete it out of my project. And then I just have these two little files at the beginning, and they are going to, I'm going to export them, and I'm going to export as a wave. I'm going to save it in my project folder. And I usually call this interview 1 final edit, something where I know it's complete. Now, I don't want to save it in this complete one because that is the one that's kind of my backup with all my stuff in it. So I'm going to save it here, final edit, and you'll see it's going to it calls it a wave, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to hit OK, and it says here, your tracks will be mixed down and exported as one mono file. Yay, that's exactly what I want. OK. So now it gives me the ability to edit metadata. I'm not going to worry about that, but if you were sending this off to a podcasting site, for instance, you would want to be sure all this information was filled in. There we go. And if we go back now to my folder, here we have my interview final edit WAV, and I'm going to have it open this with, we'll open it with QuickTime just to make sure it's playing correctly, and we'll hit play.
Some of the smaller things I would share is just the simplest things of people wanting to sit at a different table because the air quality is better over there.
So there we go. So that's actually just the beginning of my story, right? But you can see we've tweaked it and exported it, and that is how you get a project started. And we will talk more about the other pieces of your project, either in class or in another tutorial.